Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking to Denise Keehan-Smith. She's a candidate for the 26th Council District, which covers Sunnyside, Woodside, Long Island City, and parts of Astoria. Thanks for joining me today, Denise.
Thank you, Christian. Good to be here.
Great. So tell me, Denise, a lot of people know you in the community, but obviously some won't. Can you sort of give us a bit of a rundown on your background and why you're running for the 26th Council District?
Sure. Yep. For those who don't know me, I was born and raised in Woodside. I'm actually third generation, very proud of that. My grandparents moved here from Manhattan, settled onto 52nd Street and Skillman Avenue. And my family, my aunts, my uncles, we were all educated through the local schools, PS 11 and St. Sebastian's. I was an active participant in CYO programs. I had a job at a local bakery when I was a teenager on 62nd Street and Roosevelt Avenue, V&B Bakery.
Mm-hmm.
And been here, most of my life, not all of my life, but most of my life. I have a 30-year career, over 30 years, that I spent working for a travel technology company. And unfortunately, earlier this year, due to the pandemic, I am no longer employed. I accepted a package from my company. So so that freed up some of my time. And then some of the other things that I do is that I'm a district leader for the 30th Assembly District Part A, which covers portions of Woodside, Maspeth, and Middle Village. I was also served on my Community Board 2, for 8 years. 4 of those years I was chair of the Community Board, and 4 I was also chair of transportation. Some of that time coincided. And then I also, more locally, in the Big Six, I live in a Mitchell-Lama complex, the Big Six, and I served on the board for 3 years, and I was vice president and president. So I'm very much engaged in local politics that go on, local issues, and it was my time at Big Six, or being on the Big Six board, that I was asked if I would be interested in joining Community Board 2. And it seemed like an interesting prospect for me. I thought, I could learn even more. I could help people. I could get the inside scoop on what's going on.
So tell us a little bit about your 8 years at Community Board 2, what you learned and how that would maybe help you if you were to become the council member for the district.
Well, the 8 years in general was really, I just gained a wealth of knowledge that I don't think anybody else could have unless they experienced that. So when I first started on CB2, for the first 2 years, I just kind of listened and learned, observed the way the agencies function, with the community. I became secretary in 2014, enabling me to have a more in-depth role on the community board. I got to know a lot of people during that process. And then in 2015, I became chair of the transportation committee and held that role until December of 2018, and then became chair of community board in June of 2016. After Pat O'Brien stepped down. So as my role increased, so did my breadth of knowledge related to working for the community. How do we resolve problems? How do we help people, small businesses, just general things like that, learning, proper procedures, understanding the ULERT process, which is, for anyone that might not know, it's the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, and it's a process in which developers are required to engage with and go through, working with the community for any projects that they wish to have built or constructed in a certain area.
Denise, you were at the helm when a number of big things happened in the community. You were the chair. One of those was Amazon. Obviously it's a bit of old history now, but it gives us an indication as to sort of your thoughts on land use. What were your thoughts about Amazon when it came, or when the proposal was for Annabelle Basin in Long Island City? And yeah, what was your role and what were your thoughts on it?
Well, yes, I'll share that with you, but I would like to just preface that by saying that Annabelle Basin was being looked at and considered for rezoning prior to Amazon being interested in that space.
Mm,
So we were looking at, there are a couple of individual developers that were looking at doing their own developments around the basin. They were not working together. They were not aligned in their approach. So when, and the local community was not happy about some of the prospects that, the buildings would be a certain height,
hmm
would impact infrastructure, our sewer system in particular. We had flooding issues. We had Superstorm Sandy from 2012. So there was a great deal of concern amongst the community members that lived directly in that area, and that was pre-Amazon. And then when Amazon came along, we did not go through the typical ULURP process. That was the governor
Yeah.
created something called the GPP, the Greater
Mm,
Project Plan. And so I was asked to sit on the Amazon Community Advisory Council and was a committee co-chair
hmm
for the GPP. So I had very in-depth knowledge about what was happening, what the plan, well, I shouldn't really say what the plans were because we had a general idea of the
mm,
physical location of where the buildings would be located, but there were a lot of misunderstanding, I think, in the
hmm
general public. So, one of the things for sure was that the buildings would not be as high as originally expected. They weren't not going to be residential units. They were going to be
Yeah.
bulkier based buildings. It was for office complex. It was not warehouse. It was only for, the
hmm
marketing departments and accounting and technology, etc. So there was not going to be any warehousing over there. And because the governor uh, usurped
Yeah.
the land use process, there was some people in that local area that were upset that they were not, or they believed they would not have a say in what was
Mm,
going to happen there. But being on the council, the governor's office with the Empire State Development Corporation and the EDC, they got a group of people together, key stakeholders, to ensure that all aspects of the project were being considered and how could the community benefit from this development. So I was on it, and my co-chair was Liz Luskin from Long Island City Partnership. And then we had people from the Queensbridge houses, Woodside houses,
mm,
Raven, Astoria, all the leaders of the tenant associations from NYCHA. We had the local principal of Long Island City Technology High School.
mhm.
We had LaGuardia College involved in this. So many saw this, including me, as a good opportunity to create jobs, not only for the immediate local area, but for areas within the entire community board district,
Mm,
including Side and Woodside. And, these are people that were fully engaged Christian. I mean, we met on a regular basis, a couple of times a week, early in the morning or late at night. And we really had meaningful discussions about how this could truly benefit the residents. There were some concerns about resiliency and infrastructure in general, but the business impact would not be as severe as a residential impact to the local infrastructure.
mm,
The thought was that people could live and work within the Long Island City community. So that was something that we were hoping could come to fruition, but they had 90 days to make a decision. It was my understanding when I agreed to be a part of the council that I would have to consider this for a year. It would be a year-long process that we would go through and really determine if this would be beneficial for the community or not, but we never got to that at 90 days.
Based on your knowledge, though, Denise, your close-up, view on all of this, did you think it was a good thing for the community, an
I did.
opportunity? You did.
Yeah, I did. And, there was a lot of pushback about, tax incentives, and, they were, excuse me, Amazon was getting $3 billion. Well, it's not true. Amazon would get incentives that any other business coming into the outer boroughs would receive. And that's a state law. So it's not as though it was anything specific to Amazon. Any business would have gotten that. And it would have been, there were certain parameters that had to be met. They had to create so many jobs. I don't know, it was like 15 or 25 jobs, and they had to earn a certain amount. It was expected that they would generate $30 billion in revenue. So it wasn't like we were handing them a check for $3 billion. It was, they had to earn it.
Okay. Now, looking at the site today, and you know it very, very well, the developers are all joining together. I think there's 4 of them. TF Cornerstone with the public land, there's a bit of back and forth over that. What do you think should go there today at that, those 20 odd acres where Amazon was going to go?
Okay, most of the property is privately owned.
Yes,
okay, so I'll just say that. So in the summer of 2019, EDC and city planning came to me at CB2 and CB1, Marie Torniali, she is the chair of CB1, and they wanted us to come together and create a comprehensive waterfront plan. And we wanted to look at everything along the waterfront as far as development is concerned. During our first meeting, we determined, CB2 and CB1, that there's far too much activity in the CB2, which is south of the 59th Street Bridge, that CB1 didn't touch. So they said, we're going to back off, and you guys just focus on what you want to focus on for, particularly around the Annabelle Basin. Yeah. So I engaged, with Lisa Geller, who is the current chair. She was the land use chair. We got 12 stakeholders together from the local area and said, if we create this comprehensive plan, what do we need to do? How do we do it? What does it look like? So the first thing, and we had in-depth, again, conversations. We met every week throughout the summer and had in-depth conversations about open space and resiliency, and what do we need to do for that, and how do we improve transportation. If we have more people living here, how do we get them around and to where they need to go, and infrastructure as far as sewers, etc. So we really were fully engaged in that. The 4 developers, and there's actually 5 because one is a partnership. The 4 developers started to engage in the process and met with us. And as you may be aware, they're part of your LIC. So it's Plaxall, TF Cornerstone, L&L Mag, and Simon Barron. Yeah. And so, we met for, a few months, and they presented their final product, or their vision of what it would look like. And the local community was not happy with it. It was probably too high.
What were your thoughts, Denise?
I didn't, I was kind of taken out of Community Board 2 while all this was happening. So the last I know is that they presented their plans and the community was not happy with it. But I don't know to a greater detail what they expected it to look like. And I believe that at this point, the developers are no longer working together. Right. Oh, that's my understanding. I don't even think they're working together anymore.
Okay. Another big land use issue in Community Board 2, and it's happening right now, is FIPS in Sunnyside. What is your view on that project?
Bad idea. I'm very much opposed to it, and I wrote an email of opposition. And I'll tell you why, Christian, because forget the location, that it's right on top of the Long Island Railroad tracks, etc. Yeah. But I keep hearing this kind of mantra, how do we say no? How do we say no to affordable housing?
Right.
And we said no. We did say no to affordable housing when they presented it 4 years ago.
Mm.
And we were very clear that it did not meet the demands of the desired AMI. It's not affordable. It is not affordable to the Woodside residents, nor is it affordable to the intended residents of homeless people coming out of homelessness. The AMI is just too high. And that's the reality. So, people try to say that, sorry.
I'm sorry, Denise, even at the reduced levels, because they did reduce them, from 4 years ago, the AMIs as an area median income, you felt that was still too high, nevertheless.
It's still too high. Yeah, and if you attended the board meeting, the board apparently created a stipulation that the 90% was too high, and they were going to try to force it down to 80%. With no agreement whatsoever by the developer. We're accused of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, that's not true. Take a look up on Roosevelt Avenue and Queens Boulevard between 51st Street and 53rd Streets. You see multiple unit dwellings being constructed there right now. In addition, we have a new development coming up at 6204 Roosevelt Avenue, which is a monstrosity. So it's going to add more apartments to the area. The 7 train, some of my arguments too are that, the 7 train is not the best. There's always problems with it when it was running. And now we're hearing that they may reduce service by 40% due to coronavirus losses. Financial loss. So I don't think it's a good idea. And the other thing is too, all these issues that are being brought up for the current location of Phipps, the current building, we brought them all up 4 years ago. We told them we want to see improvements. We want certain things that we want to occur. And here we are 4 years later, and they've done none of it. And now we sit in a meeting, I'm observing this meeting, and I don't know who he is. I guess the general manager or VP or something at Phipps says, "Oh yeah, we're going to engage in an action plan, and we're going to follow up. And we're going to do this. That's all we hear is we're going to.
Right.
Well, what have you been doing for 4 years? That's another issue that I have too. As far as we're stretched to the limits. Infrastructure. There's a new school on 48th Street and Barnett Avenue. It's going to congest the area. And I don't think it's a good idea. And I wrote a letter of opposition, and I will attend, Donovan Richards, the Queensboro president, is required to have a hearing and vote upon within 30 days from the community board. So I plan to attend that hearing. I don't know the date yet, but I will continue to speak out against this project.
Okay. All right. Now, Denise, an issue that's, in the city, or that's being debated all year or half of the year in the city council is the NYPD and the budget. $6 billion was the budget initially, and then they discussed about cutting it in various ways. What are your thoughts on the NYPD and on the budget for it?
I would not, if you're asking me I don't agree with the budget cuts. I would not abolish NYPD, nor would I defund the police. It's just not something I agree with. Christian, I have the benefit of having been chair where I speak with people in very different neighborhoods: Woodside, Sunnyside, Blissville, Long Island City. I don't know the NYCHA houses as well because they don't fall into CB2. They're all contained in CB1, so I don't have as strong of a relationship with them. But I have spoken to members of those communities, and there's serious gang activity that continues to exist today within the NYCHA houses. And not one of those leaders have called, not to my knowledge, and for the ones I've spoken to, nobody wants to defund the police. They believe they need the police. And so, I believe in supporting what the community needs. I don't support the defunding.
Okay. Now, another big issue in the community board district, or the 26th council district rather, is, the transportation network. Now, you were, the head of the Transportation Committee when the Queens Boulevard Phase 1 went into effect, and you were then the chair of Community Board when the Skillman Avenue, 43rd Avenue changes were made. So what were your thoughts, looking back now, what do you think about both of those plans? And also, what do you think should be done in terms of, the transportation network going forward?
Okay, well, as you stated, I had just become chair of the Transportation Committee when the Queens Boulevard initiative started with Division Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my personal opinion that it was not a good idea, having grown up here, having walked the streets and, lived in the neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
Queens Boulevard is a scary place, right? I mean, it's gotten better. And in fact, 65th Place and Queens Boulevard was the most dangerous intersection along the corridor. Okay. And so when DOT first came to us and presented some of their changes, I agreed with that. If we can save a life, if we can, prevent an accident, I think it's a great idea. I'm all for it. But when the full plan was presented in 2015, we were the first phase of the Queens Boulevard project. So I was well aware that we were just the beginning, that it was going to, extend further down east, Queens Boulevard, beginning at 50th Street. And so I wrote a letter at that time to the mayor and DOT, and outlining my concerns, some of the things that I'm concerned about. Particularly, I don't like the little side cuts that you go through from the main road to the service road and vice versa. The slips, yeah. So I was concerned about that. There were several things I was concerned about. And I wrote the letter and they said, no, everything is going to be addressed and we're going to take care of it. And we have to push forward. And this is the first phase and we'll listen to your feedback, etc. And then So there were a lot of problems with it that I felt were, suggestions that were not addressed. And even simple things, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, and I tend to get too technical or detail-oriented, so I apologize if you want to cut me off, but, the exit ramp at 65th Place and Queens Boulevard, okay? When you come up off the ramp, you're in the service lane, but on the main stretch of Queens Boulevard, there's also a lane where you both go under, both cars could go under the BQE underpass to go on to get back on the BQE. So if there was traffic on the BQE, people were kind of maneuvering and getting off and get back on, and it was quite dangerous. And so the Transportation Committee asked repeatedly, could we have one of those digital signs, that direct people, 2 lanes only, you must remain, do some sort of, especially in the beginning, do some sort of like cautionary thing about don't cut the line, don't do this. And it just fell on deaf ears for, a year, and just things didn't get improved. And, they took some parking away for the neighborhood. And then DOT was able to give it back a little bit off Queens Boulevard. So that kind of worked out, but, and it was a bigger issue at the time. So when they came along in 2017, DOT in 2017 and said, okay, well, we're going to present you this proposal to redesign Skillman and 43rd Avenue.
Just stop you a moment, Denise. So looking back on Queens Boulevard, and do you think it was a good thing, the redesign? And how did you vote on it at the time?
At the time, I clearly remember it was unanimous. It was the full board voted on it unanimously on Queens Boulevard.
For it, right?
Yes, they voted in favor of it. So I think it was, I think it created a lot of traffic congestion. And now I'm hearing that there are proposals that were initially presented, but I guess now have stopped due to financial constraints, that the buses, the Q60 bus and the bike lanes now may be moved into the center area, the center lanes. Which my concern about that, which of course I wrote a letter of opposition against, is because especially where it comes by Big Six, we have a lot of elderly and seniors in the complex, and children, that take the buses to go to school. And my concern is that if you put the buses in the middle lanes, then you have to create an island. And I just felt like there wasn't enough space. And I still don't agree that they should move forward with it. But I felt like we'll have seniors and we'll have kids waiting out in this median where it's not safe by Big Six. And then especially in the intersection that I just talked about is 65th Place and Queens Boulevard, where you have the entrance and exits of the BQE. So you'll have cars, I see it now. If they're not
Denise,
familiar
I'm going
with
to
the
push
area.
you a little bit. I'm going to push you a little bit. Do you think Queens Boulevard is better today than it was in 2014?
Better as far as what?
Safer.
I think it's safer. Yes.
It's safer. So do you think then what we have today is better than 2013 or before it was implemented?
It has slowed traffic down significantly, but as far as safety is concerned, what I still continue to see today are that bicyclists go through red lights, particularly at 60th and Queens Boulevard, and there are near misses every day.
Okay. All right. So moving on to Skillman and 43rd Avenue, you were the chair at the time. It was contentious. Perhaps it's still contentious. Who knows? What are your views on it now, 2 years after it went into place?
It's a bad design. And that's what we said the whole time. We said that from the very beginning when it was first presented to us. We asked, and in particular, I repeat and I continue to ask when I see them, give us back that second lane from 56th Street until 49th Street. Okay, so you have the school. So take the school out of it. Yes, so maybe 54th Street. From 54th to 49th Street should be 2 lanes. There's absolutely no reason why they had to remove 1 lane of traffic. If you get a delivery or you have a sanitation truck going through picking up, you hold up traffic for a significant amount of time. And, I'm not in favor of it. It's a poor redesign. And bicyclists, keep in mind, there were always bike lanes. There were bike lanes on both avenues. They created dedicated bike lanes, which we see now because, the local businesses were tracking it. You have more injuries now than before. So I don't think that has improved the conditions at all.
See, I think the DOT says otherwise in terms of data.
Yeah, but you can create your own data. Right. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's the way you look at things. And, these anonymous surveys or etc. There's no accountability.
Okay.
I don't believe that.
In terms of the overall network in Western Queens, what do you think can be done to improve, people moving around, so to speak, in this district?
Okay, well, there are a couple of things too. I mean, we have the East Side Access Tunnel. That's there today. I don't know what the holdup is, but it's scheduled to be available on Skillman Avenue and Queens Boulevard. That's the hope that there's going to create a station down there to help move people to not only to Manhattan, but could also take people on the Metro North, up to the regional area. I'm sorry, not Metro North, Amtrak. But then I was a panelist on a Mitchell Moss discussion last January with Bronx Borough President.
Who is he, Denise?
I'm sorry?
Mitchell Moss, who is he? Excuse me.
He's from NYU. He's a professor from NYU, and he focuses. He's an attorney, and he focuses on specific topics for discussion. And so he asked me to participate because of Sunnyside Yards, because it falls under CB2. So I'm not in favor overall of Sunnyside Yards, but I am in favor of the rail aspect of it. And as Bronx Borough President, Ruben Diaz Jr., pointed out, there is a way now, there are rails in existence that could take people from the Bronx to Queens, bypassing Manhattan, which I think would be a wonderful idea. You know, and then you could transfer to Metro North, you know, for other locations going north. So I think that's a great idea. I was also a secretary. I sat on the QNS rail line, which covers rail transportation. It was started by Elizabeth Crowley through the central Queens area, and runs just south of pretty much our district, but creates a stop in Blissville, you know, and offers an option of Blissville and Long Island City. It would end down in Long Island City. So, you know, I think rail's the way to go. I'm not in favor of the BQX proposal, you know, but I think that the powers that be, you know, and really DOT in particular, that we have to really try to encourage them to find alternate modes of transportation. You know, I see transportation alternatives when I hear that word transportation or that phrase. You know, I think that that's a group that would create alternate modes of transportation. Unfortunately, all we see from them is bicycles or scooters. And, you know, what do we do with the elderly? What do we do with the disabled? How do we get them around? How do we get them to their doctor's appointments? How do we, you know, them get around in general? And so that's really what I think we need to come up with. You know, I don't know if that's a light rail down Queens Boulevard. You know, I don't know. You know, I know that Bloomberg proposed that on 42nd Street many years ago. But I don't know if it's realistic. But I haven't heard any. You know, I haven't heard anything. But you know, typically I like the rails and buses.
All right. Next topic is community boards and community board appointments. You know, obviously you were not reappointed this year for reasons nobody really knows publicly in any event. But
I'll tell you.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what was your question? Go ahead.
Well, what are your thoughts on how community board members should be picked?
You know, Christian, it's really not a problem. It was only a problem created by one city council person and an acting Queensborough president. And, you know, the way I see it, you know, having served on the board from 8 years ago, is typically I think the best way to do it is through civic engagement. People that are deeply involved with their communities, people that, you know, help out, you know, whether it's food pantries or cleaning up or, you know, just civic groups in general that help their neighbors. You know, I think that's the people that should be considered for positions on the community board. And I don't really think that, you know, I think the council member could have, you know, a say in it or an opinion, or if somebody is not well known to the Queensborough president, you know, if they want to kind of, you know, lift them up or encourage them, that's one thing. But, you know, it's become, in my opinion, far too political. And I was, you know, unfortunately, due to some sensationalized headlines, I was not thrown off the community board. I was not reappointed after a 2-year period. Everybody has to be reappointed, and if they want to stay on, and I was not. And so that was because of a conflict that I had with the district manager, Deborah Markell. And Deborah Markell, I was not comfortable with where she was or what she was doing, and I asked her to account for her time, and she refused to comply. So I, you know, stopped signing her timesheets because I was required to do so. And I stopped signing her timesheets in June of 2019 and reached out to Queensborough Hall and asked them for assistance in helping me deal with this matter. She's a city employee. She's not her own entity, and she has to be held accountable for her time. And I didn't hear back, and I continued. I have all the emails documented. I have the phone calls documented. and no response. And in January of 2020, I sent a letter to the Department of Investigations and asked them to investigate this for me. And it went back to Queensborough Hall in, I think it was about February of 2020. And, went on from there. And then in May, I was told through a local newspaper, I read in a local newspaper that charges had been filed against me through an EEOC complaint. So it wasn't a real legally harassment charge. It was through the EEOC claiming that I discriminated against her for age, disability, and religion, which was completely not true. I've never been accused of anything like that before. And I didn't know it until I read in the paper that she had done that back in March. So my complaint was, well, if all this is true, why wasn't I told in March and given an opportunity to defend myself? To this day, Christian, there is absolutely no proof whatsoever. No proof whatsoever. I've never been told supposedly what I did or what I said or in any way in which I discriminated against her, because I didn't. And they can't falsify that. And that's why I was, surprised, though, that Sharon Lee called me, at the 11th hour. Literally, it was almost 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday, because legally, she's required to advise me that I haven't been reappointed. And she knew I wasn't home. I told her I wasn't home. I didn't know that was coming, but she told me she wanted to talk to me and told me that I wasn't being reappointed. And I argued with her because I also found out later on from the DOI investigations unit that they weren't sure that she had the legal authority to do that, because she was only an acting borough president. She was not duly elected. And I had been elected 5 times unanimously from my board. So the whole thing, in my opinion, was a mess. And then Jimmy claims that he had nothing to do with it, Jimmy Van Bremer, but I don't see how he didn't have anything to do with it, because the same thing happened, as you may know, to Nancy Silverman on CB1. She had, she was very vocal about it, so I'm not, letting anything out of the bag about that she was not reappointed either. And so, of all the council members within Queens, there was only one council member that was involved in 2 people not being reappointed, high-profile people. Nancy is, CUNY professor. She's part of Transportation Alternatives. And, I get along with, I like Nancy. So I don't know why.
When you peel the onion right back, why do you think you were not reappointed? Was it that particular complaint, or was there something more to it than that?
I think it was the cover. I think it was the cover up, because I had pointed out some things that were not done properly through Queensborough Hall and through the Department of Investigations. But it is interesting that I believe that Jimmy realizes that I, wouldn't go along with, I think, some of the things that he's trying to accomplish now. That's what I believe.
All right.
Now, I don't know whether or not it's true. But...
Okay. All right.
Like Barnett. All
right. You mean Phipps, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we call it Barnett.
Yeah. So just to finish up on the community board aspect, so how would you appoint board members? I know you mentioned looking at people in terms of their civic engagement. Would you have like half of them appointed by the council member, half of them appointed by the borough president, with the borough president sort of overseeing it all? Would you change that whole process?
No, I don't think I would change the process. I don't think it's necessary for a couple of bad actors to change a process that has worked for a very long time. Okay. I really believe that. I mean, I know I've heard some talk about we should do an election and we should. Why? It's not necessary. Elections cost money. Okay. It really does. And then how do you know that you're really getting the right people? Prove who you are and that what you've done is significant in your community, and, present it to the Queensborough president.
Okay. Denise, my last question deals with schools. as you well know, this district has a shortage of school seats. Um, you know, when the pandemic ends, that's going to be more felt, I guess. So how would you go about citing new schools in the district?
Well, I've had many conversations with
Mhm.
the school construction authority about this because obviously we need more schools, as you mentioned. And really, we just look for available properties. They
Mhm.
have to meet certain criteria. And, that could be done through the land use. We did committee, we did combine land use and education
Mhm.
for specific period, to be our eyes and ears. If, really, who knows more about it than the teachers or the moms or, the dads involved with their children? If you hear about a location, present it to the community board and let SCA take a look at it. It's through word of mouth. That's mostly how it's going to happen because it is frustrating.
Mhm.
But I think that's how you do it, community engagement. So you're not going to let me talk about my important topics that I want to bring up about why I'm running too for specific issues.
Yes,
I want
go
to
ahead.
mention, if you don't mind, Chris.
Mm.
Yeah, so I would like to mention small business. I really believe that we need a plan to help them and
Mhm.
not through loans, as most of us saw through the PPP loans. A lot of that money went to larger chains
Yeah, that's
and
right.
really didn't impact smaller businesses. So let's be better about that, how we manage that process and put certain parameters around the requirements in order to
Mhm.
obtain these. So I don't want to say loans. I think this should be grants.
Yeah.
They're the lifeline of our community. Number two, we need to develop a plan for homelessness. It's overwhelming, especially in Blissville. We have approximately now 300 homeless residents living within the shelters. The mayor started his Turning the Tide plan in 2017, which was supposed to end in 2022. It has now been extended to 2026.
Mhm.
So we have to get people out of hotels. I believe we need to build shelters for them, permanent housing for people. And and the NYPD, I don't think that we can, just discard them. I think that we need to work together. I think there's improvements, if we need to come up with a solution. And that's what I believe.
Okay. So what policies would you introduce to combat homelessness or help people in need, so to speak?
Well, Queens was the only borough that did not have cluster sites. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It was, certain number of apartments within a building, which could also have residents that were not typically previously homeless. They were falling down. They had a large number of violations. And so the thought was move people out of the clusters into these hotels. It's not working. And, living in a hotel is not an ideal situation for any family.
Mhm.
They don't have kitchens, they don't have enough space, but we're not keeping up with the demand. I think there's like at one point from the previous data I read, there were like 1 million people that needed housing, and there was only 500 people that could actually afford it. So I think we need to take preventative action, especially, now we're spending on average, I'll say about $250 a night, to house a homeless family.
Mm.
Whereas if you could take preventative measures and that family is living in an apartment but falling behind, or they know they're not going to make it, they should have some way of reaching out to their community or to some sort of resource center to say, hey, look, I need help. Please help me. And just establish, rather than spending the money on the hotels, spend the money on the preventative measures to keep people in their homes
Mm.
before they go homeless.
Okay.
That's one of the things I think is really most important. And create really affordable housing. Like we said, the new FIPS project is not truly affordable.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to finish up?
No, except to say that I'm the best candidate for the district. I've
Mhm.
been here, born and raised here. I don't, I make no bones about it. I was educated here, lived here most of my life. I'm fully engaged with every district, Woodside, Sunnyside, Long Island City, and Blissville. A little bit of Astoria, I don't know as well. But, you know, I really, I have the ability to look at an issue, objectively determine overall big picture, what's going to be the best thing for the community. And I'm strong enough to make a decision and stand on my own.
Well, Denise, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Christian. It was good to see you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.